So I thought we would return to basics. I thought we would make a return to basics and work with a very basic pelvic clock. What do you think? So all you'll need is a space to lie down on the floor. So if you're already on the floor, on your backs, you can begin to notice your breathing. And notice what might change in terms of your contact with the floor as you breathe in and as you breathe out. Notice how you've placed your arms, where you've placed your arms, if the palms are up or down. How far is the right arm lying from your body, and how far is the left arm lying from your body? How far apart are your heels? What is the distance behind the right knee and the floor, and the left knee and the floor? What is the distance of the back of your neck from the floor? And where, on what area of your skull are you bearing the weight of your head? And then if you go down with your awareness to your pelvis, on what part of your pelvis do you rest with the most clarity, with the most weight? So might you rest more towards the tail, or more towards the back of the waist, or somewhere in between? Is your pelvis more heavily weighted on one side when compared to the other? And could you stand your feet? Could you bring your feet to standing? And just to revisit a lesson for a moment that we did earlier during our pandemic, our ongoing pandemic series, can you, with your arms down by your sides, just lift your right index finger from the floor and feel how light it is. Feel how light it is to raise the right index finger from the floor. And then without engaging through the left foot, by pressing into the floor, could you lift the right foot from the floor with the same, looking for the same type of lightness as you have in lifting your right finger? And it's just, you just pick it up a little bit, just an inch or two from the floor, and set it back down. And then lift the finger, and then lift the foot, and keep comparing, lifting the finger, feel how light that is, and then lifting the foot and feeling how light that may be or may not be. But seeing if you can find a way to use the floor behind you to help the foot lift in such a way that it feels like a little puff of air puffs under it and it floats away from the floor. The finger and then the foot. And how do you breathe? How do you breathe? And then could you move with your awareness over to your left side, your left finger, your left index finger, and lift your left index finger a few times and feel how light the left finger is. And then how might you employ the floor, your back against the floor, your pelvic bones, excuse me, against the floor, so that that left foot could levitate as lightly as the left finger. And you might not find that right away. It's something to search for, something to experiment with, something to explore. And then could you alternate lifting a finger and then a foot? It can be either foot, either finger. And just comparing the sense of lightness, the sense of ease, or the sense of heaviness. And then leave that and pause. And now can you rock your pelvis towards your head and feel how you do that? Roll your pelvis towards your head and feel how you do that. So we're not lifting the pelvis, we're simply rolling the pelvis. Notice where you initiate from. The lower back coming closer to the floor. Notice if the two elephant ear bones of the pelvis roll evenly towards your head as the pelvis rolls under. And you may already be doing this, but could you do this in a specific way, which is to pull the lower abdomen in? You pull the lower abdomen in and the pelvis rocks towards the head. And then you simply let go. And just do that several times. In concert somehow with your breathing. And you can experiment with that. Do you breathe in as you pull the belly in? Or is it easier if you blow the air out to pull the belly in? And you feel your pelvis rocking along your sacrum towards the back of your waist. And you may not feel the back of the waist coming into contact with the floor. That's fine, but you can perhaps sense the different tissues in your back receiving contact from the floor or changing their relationship with the floor. Do you draw your pelvis towards the head as you draw the belly in? Is it the same on the right as it is on the left? Where inside the pelvis is the place that is not right and is not left? And notice if this movement travels up to the head. Notice if it travels up to the head. Maybe, maybe not. Take a rest. You can leave your feet standing or you can let your legs go long. stand up your feet again. Lift your right index finger and set it down. Lift your left index finger and set it down. Lift your right index finger and your left foot. Maybe as light, one as light as the other. And your right foot and your left index finger. And what happens with your pelvis? What happens with your pelvis as one foot becomes lighter? Using your index finger as a gauge, as a measuring stick for how light you want the foot to feel. And how does the weight travel across the back of the pelvis? The next time both of your feet are on the floor, can you pull the belly in again so that the pelvis rocks under? And then can you push the belly out so that the pelvis rolls away from the head? So you'll flatten out your chest. You'll flatten out your chest. And exhale and let the lower abdomen down by the pubic bone get full. So add this element to the rolling pelvis, towards and away from the head. So you could inhale as you pull the lower abdomen in and up, so the pelvis rocks under, you get hold of the pelvis, and then flattening the chest and the lower abdomen getting full so that you roll the pelvis towards the tail. And the feet really don't need to help. They're just there. They're receiving information from the floor, but they're not directing the movement. So it's the muscles of the abdomen that are rolling the pelvis towards the head, and it's in part the diaphragm and the belly rolling forward, but also you're engaging the muscles in your back as you rock the pelvis towards your tail, towards your feet. And listen to, as this movement travels through you like a wave, is there any response in the head? Is there any way in which the head might be mirroring the movement of the pelvis? So that as the pelvis is rolling towards the head is rolled away from the pelvis. And as you engage the back muscles and flatten out the chest to blow the belly forward and the pelvis rolling downwards, what might happen? What might your head be invited to do then? Connected as these two areas of the skeleton are, your pelvis and your head. Connected through the spine. So you might have a sense of your spine flowing along the floor. With the breath. And now just to play a little bit, would it be easier to lift one foot as the pelvis is rolling towards the head or as it is rolling away from the head? You can try that. Use your finger as the measure of how light the foot can be. Does the lifting of one foot somehow assist the pelvis, or does it interfere for you? What if you were to lift both feet away from the floor at the same time? Would you be rolling the pelvis towards them, or would you be rolling the pelvis towards your head? Lightly, very lightly. And let your legs go down long. And could you enact this movement with your legs long, using your pelvis? Using your abdominals, and using your back muscles, and using your breath to roll the pelvis under and to roll the pelvis away. And you might find that the backs of the knees respond, the heels respond somehow. Pulling the belly in to roll the pelvis under, and pushing the belly out to rock the pelvis towards the feet. And now could you impose the image of a clock, that you're lying on the face of a clock, and 12 o'clock is towards the back of the waist and 6 is towards the tail. So that'll be our orientation for the numbers of the clock. And you have to do an interesting thing to sort of turn your mind inside out to see that. But can you stand your feet again? And now with this image of the clock imposed, can you draw the belly in and so that it rocks towards 12? And then flatten the chest and drive it down so that the belly pushes out and the pelvis rocks towards 6. And how is this movement now that you've imposed something exterior to it? The image of a clock, an imagined clock. Did that somehow shift something in your perception of yourself, or in how you engage with yourself? And then could you, in your mind, could you locate 9 o'clock and 3 o'clock? So 9 o'clock will be towards the right, and 3 o'clock will be towards the left. And how would you direct your pelvis towards 9 o'clock, which would be rolling the pelvis to the right? How would you do that? And then coming back to the center. So the pelvis is rolling just to the right and back to the middle. And how are you directing the pelvis towards the ninth hour? And how might you direct it without using the feet? Without using the feet. And without having the knees starting to wave about. So that the knees are stable and the pelvis is moving relative to the head of the femur. So if the knees are waving about, then there's not the chance of differentiation in the hip joints. So we want to sort of highlight that. Roll the pelvis. So you're engaging the back muscles in the left, but what are you doing with your belly on the right to roll the pelvis towards 9 o'clock? 9 o'clock is to the right. And then could you explore going from the middle of your clock to 3 over to the left towards the wide pelvic bone? Your clock can be the size that feels right for you. It could be just the size of your sacrum. And you may feel that if you're directing yourself to keep your knees stable, that one knee appears to go away from you, or feels like it's going further away from you as you roll the pelvis to the left and back. And then could you combine, marry, integrate the right and the left, 3 and 9, so that the pelvis is rolling from right to left. The feet are standing, but not pressing, although you may feel one foot gets heavier as the pelvis rolls one direction and the other. And so here's how we learn to stand before we've even learned to stand. So the infant rolling the pelvis on the floor, something happens. There's a sensation through the feet. And the differentiation. If you were to continue rolling your pelvis, and you can rest as you need to, I'll just continue suggesting things to play with. But if you were to continue rolling your pelvis right and left and allow your knees to go with you, this is a way that it can be very easy to find out how to roll the pelvis. So you could tilt the knees to the right and to the left. And if you pay attention to what's going on in the connection between the pelvis and your knees, there's not much differentiation there. You're moving the legs and the pelvic bone as a unit. And one knee's going forward, of course, the other knee's coming closer. But it's different if you direct yourself to inhibit the movement of the legs and just roll the pelvis. So now something very different has to happen that we want to have available to us so that we have more options for movement in the hip joint, which is asked to bear our weight every step we take. So the more options we have, the more, just the more options we have. And you can let your legs go down long and take a rest. Bend up your legs again, stand your feet a comfortable distance apart. And again, direct yourself to rock the pelvis towards 12 and 6 and see if it's a little more accurate now. You're using your abdominals to pull the pubic bone towards the head, and the extended belly and the flattening chest and the back muscles to direct the pelvis towards the feet. And then could you do that a little quicker? A little quicker. So maybe 2 or 3 or 4 times in one cycle of breath. And how do you manage that as you breathe? And then could you, the next time you're at 12, slow down and explore going to the right from 12 to 11 to 10 and to 9, and back from 9 to 10 to 11 to 12. Without the knees tilting, using your back muscles. How are you going to engage the back? You're going to have to engage the back in a very specific way. As soon as you start to roll to the right, the left side of your back starts to engage. And you can direct your pelvis. You've got the floor there to tell you where you are. Your feedback from the floor is what's telling you where you are. And then when you come to 9, you're going to have to, as you start rolling the pelvis under and flattening it out, you're going to have to disengage, inhibit your use of the back muscles, and use the abdominals in a very specific way to roll your pelvis back flat on your back. So get to know this quadrant. Get to know this quadrant of your clock. How you're engaging on the left side and the right side as you go around, and what you do with your interior to replace your pelvis in a circular path back down onto the floor. Pause. And now let your pelvis travel towards 9 and towards 3, rolling towards 9 and towards 3, and compare, is there a difference there? Is there a difference between the two sides? Keeping the knees stable so the pelvis can turn around the hip joints. The socket can turn around the ball of the head of the femur. And which knee goes forward? Does one knee go forward? And now as you continue, excuse me, rolling the pelvis from right to left, could you engage your head? Could you do something with your skeleton, with your sense of your skeleton, so that the back of your head is rolling along with the back of the pelvis? So the back of the head is rolling, the face is turning a little to the right as the pelvis rolls to the right. And to the left as the pelvis rolls to the left. And if you find that your head is wanting to actually do the opposite thing, that as you roll the pelvis to the right, your head just wants to spontaneously turn to the left, then the issue is with the chest and the ribs. So how much you direct your ribs to soften and press of the floor in such a way that the head could easily roll with the pelvis. And perhaps you experiment with driving the movement of the pelvis right and left, of driving it with the chest and the rib area and your use of the floor behind you, so that the top and the bottom, the head and the pelvis, are drawn along to the right and to the left. But again, the knees are staying perpendicular to the floor. So you adjust your movements accordingly. And just as a reminder, if one side moves less rather than trying to make it move more, have the side that moves more move less, so that you can find an easy balance rather than a struggle to achieve a goal. Back of the head, the ribs and the pelvis integrating. And take a rest down. Let your legs go long if you like. Take a rest down. And again, from this resting position, if you were to pull the belly in so that the pelvis would rock under and the pubic bone would lift towards your navel and turn, and then flatten the chest and push out the belly to roll the pelvis the other way. Is this any clearer? And what happens with the head? How do you organize your breathing? How do you engage with the floor behind you? And take a rest. And stand your feet again. And now could you go from 12 to 9, again rolling your pelvis in this quarter circle and feeling how you engage through the back. And then how would you go from 9 to 6 and complete that half circle? So you have to really manage how you're switching on and switching off your back muscles and your abdominals. And when are you going to let the belly out? You're going to have to start letting the belly out as you travel around from 9 to 6, and then pulling the belly in and letting the back go as you start to flatten out the pelvis against the floor. So etch this half circle inside yourself, rolling around. In Tai Chi, there's so much emphasis on the use of the pelvis because it is the driver of all the movements and of all our movements. And in Tai Chi, there's the use of an imaginary ball inside the pelvis that can roll around. So what if you were to, in addition to the external representation of a clock on the floor, you could impose the idea of a ball inside your pelvis that's rolling around and tracing the circle, and the pelvis is weighted down by the ball, and so rolls very easily in a half circle. And is your head pinned to the floor, or could you find a way that the head could also trace this same circle, or rather half circle, but it will be a much smaller circle because the head is much smaller than the pelvis. Wherever you are, pause. Leave your feet standing and just check. Lift the right index finger to check for lightness, and then lift the right foot. And then the left index finger and the left foot. And is one side lighter than the other? And take a rest down. Is there a difference in your perception of yourself between the right and the left sides? Stand up your feet again. And again, establish your 6 and your 12. Moving internally, moving yourself internally to affect the external against the clock. And is your head beginning to nod yes, following the pelvis? As the pelvis rocks towards the feet, is the chin drawn down? Could the chin be drawn down as you roll the pelvis towards the feet? And could the chin be pushed away from the chest as you draw the belly in and the pelvis rocks under? So how would you coordinate within yourself? How could you coordinate the head and the pelvis to be moving together like two wheels on a bicycle, going a little forward and a little back and a little forward and a little back, and never getting anywhere, and just sort of rocking a little forward and back? And what if the head is not responding to the pelvis? Then bring your focus to your chest and find out what you can do in this area to help the head become aware and be able to respond to the movement of the pelvis. And then if you did it quicker, so your head might be bobbing, yes, 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 yes. There we go, good. And then pause, and could you imprint now from 12 to 3 and 3 to 12? And listen to when you're going to round the belly forward. You're going to have to release the belly so that the back can engage. And then you're going to have to release the back so that the belly can engage. And can you still be vigilant that the knees don't start flopping about, but that you can precisely move the pelvis around the hip joints? And the circle does not have to be big. You can shrink your clock to the size of a wristwatch. I'm wondering if in the next several years with all these digital devices, if anyone will have the image of a clock. We might have the movements of the pelvic clock, but not the image. And then pausing as you need to, exploring how are you going to go from 3 to 6 and 6 to 3, that final quarter of your circle. And can you be very artful with your movements? Without interrupting the breath, find out how you're going to coordinate this on-off of the belly and the back. Because if the belly is engaged, then the back cannot engage. And when the back is engaged, then the belly cannot engage. So it's this exquisite timing. And again, the knees stay stable. If you might already be playing with this, but if you feel that you've got a good image inside and in terms of your relationship with the floor of this between 3 and 6 and 6 and 3, then go ahead and play with imprinting this half hour on the floor. And your head, is your head responding? Could your head also go between 6 and 12, but in a much smaller way? And now how might you drive this half circle with your chest, with your thorax, with your upper spine against the floor? In a way that both the head and the pelvis, they hear each other through this connection of the back. And you could continue, of course, rest as you need to, but you could continue to find the full circle around the clock. And you could actually drive it from your chest. You could drive it from your chest. And the head and the pelvis are making the same circle. And then you could go the other direction. Now, if you find that you can drive it from your chest and you can drive it from your pelvis and the head responds, could you drive it from your head? And if you get lost, then you just stop and start again, start over. It might be easier to start by nodding the head against the floor, saying yes, in such a way that the pelvis also says yes, which means that you have integrated your entire spine. This can come from the head. This can come from the mid-back. This can come from the pelvis. Could you, this is getting really kind of crazy, but could you, let's say, direct your pelvis towards 8 and your head towards 2? Play with that idea. Or your pelvis towards 4 and your head towards 10. And what would it be like to start with your head towards rolled towards 10 and your pelvis rolled towards 4? If you were to start a circle with your pelvis, which direction would your head respond? Would it be going in the same circle? Would it be going in the opposite circle? And what's happening in between with the chest and the ribs and the shoulders? Leave it and take a rest. Get a sense if anything has changed in your contact with the floor. One last time, stand your feet. And simply rock between 12 and 6, alternating, using your abdominals, alternating, letting go of your abdominals. And can you go lightly and quickly? And then could you pause and lift one finger and then lift one foot? Did your foot get lighter? Lift the other finger, lift a foot. And then one last time, take a few circles in the direction of your choice and listen for the engagement of the head, the response of the head, moving in tandem with your pelvis. What can you do with your chest to assist that? So that it's not really a pelvic clock, it's a whole body clock. You could place clocks all along the back of your spine. Very nice, you guys. And then rest down. And then unless there's a reason for you not to do so, could you roll to your side and bring yourself up onto your feet? And just feel how your standing posture is. Is it more ape-like? Are your arms hanging? Is your head sitting? Are your ribs hanging? If you were to look up or to look down, would your pelvis respond? Shifting weight to the right, to the left. The head, the spine, the pelvis. Turning to look around. We didn't check this at the beginning, but is it easier? You remember how it was before the lesson. Is there a little bit more ease in your movement? A little bit more integrity?